Oh, good to see you again. Thanks for coming. I saw that there was wonderful. Thanks for splitting that service. Part of it. Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. How are you?
Hi. Oh, thank you. Oh,
How about now? Okay. Thank you all for coming. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Jason Sims. I'm the chief of the Culver City Police Department, and I am so pleased to be here with you tonight to present our 2024, what we're doing now on an annual basis, so we can call it an annual RIPA report. We put a lot of time, effort, and energy into this report. This is our second year doing this. Last year, we did everything in-house and produced this report, which is an extraordinarily heavy lift. This year, we utilized an amazing consultant, Dr. Paul Connor, who's here with us tonight, to complete this report for us. And we found his involvement in this process to be so incredibly valuable, not only because he's an amazing and brilliant person, but because he brings us an outside set of eyes to this process and is able to see things that we're not seeing. And so he's been incredibly valuable throughout this process, and we're super excited to have him here tonight. Just some kind of housekeeping stuff, the way that this is going to work. I'm here and I'm joined by members of our command staff, Captain Andrew Belante, who did a lot of work and is going to take deep dives into our data if need be tonight, and Assistant Chief Troy Dunlap, who's been involved with RIPA since the beginning. We have over here our support staff, Lieutenant Eddie Bascaron, Jeanette Kirby, and Jennifer Atenza. who will be helping us out. This is being streamed live through the interwebs on WebEx, correct? And so we have some folks who are online. And then this is also being recorded, just so everybody knows. And it's going to be posted on our website, culvercitypd.org, for anybody who would like to view this at a later date. So here tonight in the back, we do have copies of our report. Please take one. Take it home. It's for you. We have waters for you if you should get thirsty, and I think everybody knows where the facilities are, but if not, if you need to use the restroom, exit this door, hang a right, and the restrooms are right there. So we are going to hear a presentation this evening from Dr. Paul Connor, who will go through the highlights of our 2024 RIPA report, talk about what RIPA is and a lot more. And then we're going to open this up for questions, because this is a community meeting, but mostly it's a listening session. We want to hear from you, what your thoughts are related to this report, what you found helpful, what you were confused by, and everything in between. So whatever you want to talk about, we will talk about. That's an important part of this process. So please, whatever questions you have, we are happy to talk about them. And we're also going to allow the folks who are joining us tonight on WebEx to ask questions when they have them. So are we going to ask folks to put questions in the chat? Is that what we're doing? Okay, so what we're going to ask the folks who are on WebEx to do this evening is, if you have a question and you'd like to ask it, just raise your hand and we will unmute you and you will be able to ask that question. If you'd rather type it in the chat, you can also do that. So you have those two options. All right, and without further ado, I will introduce Dr. Paul Connor. Please join me in welcoming him this evening.
Thank you very much. This should be working. Thank you very much. And thank you all for coming. I'd like to start with our next slide. And this is why it's important. This is an important quotation for us to start with, from Sir Robert Peel, who was the founder of the Metropolitan Police Department of London in 1829. So the founder of modern policing has this as one of its primary principles. The police are the public, and the public are the police. So your presence here tonight speaks volumes about your desire to be interactive with the department that is part of your community. One of the things about this quote is 1829 wasn't that long ago. We live in the modern world where we think policing's been around for a while, but it's only been around for less than 200 years. So as we are working through this concept, we have to keep this in mind. Policing a free society is one of the most challenging things that governments do, because we have free people who are given the power to take away the freedom of other free people. And that is complex and challenging and not easily reduced to sound bites. So tonight we're going to look at this idea of the RIPA report. We'll look at what RIPA is, and then we'll talk about what we found. Next slide, please. So as Chief Sims said, my name is Paul Connor. I am an organizational psychologist. Actually, I'm an industrial/organizational psychologist, but that takes too long to say. So nowadays we've shortened it just to organizational psychologist. So I have a PhD in organizational psychology. I did my undergrad at USC in exercise science. I know we're really close to UCLA, but I see a fellow Trojan here, so I'm good. I was born in Culver City. Yes, I was born in Culver City. Spent a lot of my time around here before traveling across town for my undergrad. Then I spent some time in the Marine Corps as a Marine officer during Desert Storm. Worked with Boy Scouts for a while, because Boy Scouts played a big role in my life. And then I became a capitalist and worked for Merrill Lynch and then Washington Mutual, and 17 years ago, started my consulting firm. My first client was the state of California's prison system, back when Arnold was governor. And our project was to reduce recidivism in the state of California. So that was a pretty rewarding project to be involved with. So that's a little bit about me. And I have in the front row my son, Micah. Yes, he adopted me, if you can notice the difference. He's here for support. Okay, so let's talk about RIPA. Next slide, please. So we're going to answer this question. What is RIPA? Next slide. So RIPA is California Assembly Bill 953. It is the Racial and Identity Profiling Act of 2015. And let's look at what RIPA wants to do. So there are 4 things that RIPA wants to do. Next slide, please. First, to prohibit racial and identity profiling by law enforcement. That's its first goal. Next slide, and this is what we're going to be talking about tonight. It requires law enforcement agencies to report data to the Attorney General's office once a year about the people that law enforcement members detain. So we're going to show you what those data elements are. And you'll may be astounded if you haven't seen this list already. Next slide, please. So here are the first 7. I'll let you read through that. Next slide, please. Here are the next 7. Next slide, please. Here are the next 7. Next slide, please. And here are the final 4. And you'll see there is a asterisk near that last one, gender of officer, because that currently was stayed by the the California State Supreme Court. And so that is no longer required at this point until that element gets adjudicated in the court system. So our next slide shows the choices that law enforcement officers get to select when they're looking at the perceived race or ethnicity of the person they detain. Next slide. These are the selections that the officer gets to make when determining the perceived gender of the person that he or she is detaining. Really? Yes, it has. Our next slide shows the first page of the form with the data that gets collected. And our next slide shows the second page. The third thing that the RIPA Act did was establish the Racial and Identity Profiling Advisory Board. And lastly, provide data, best practices, and recommendations for community advocates, organizations, law enforcement, and policymakers. So just some thoughts about RIPA. Number one, as you think about the spirit of RIPA, one of the biggest challenges is the word perceived. So we are asking our law enforcement officers to make a judgment call about what they perceive a person to be. And that's challenging. For example, if I asked you, what do you perceive me to be? What would you say? If you said Irish, you would be partially correct, because I am 20% Irish and 80% Nigerian. So that's challenging. The second challenge that comes with RIPA is that it's an unfunded requirement. The state requires it, but it does not provide police departments extra funds to collect this information. So that's a challenge. That's not in the... Yeah, but that's... It does. I'm familiar with the law. But that's not going to be the scope of tonight. I would encourage you to bring that to a city council meeting or to a assembly meeting. So again, that's beyond the scope of tonight's discussion. I appreciate your opinion and your sharing that with me, but as you can probably understand, I have no ability to implement or influence that decision. So tonight I want to focus this on what we found in the data. Okay, so let's talk about, next we're going to look at our RIPA report. Next slide, there we go. So this is an important concept to understand. We are talking about population sources. So as we think about police departments, when we talk about serving the community, police departments are required to serve the whole community. And so we understand, as we're trying to understand, how do we determine what the whole community of Culver City is? We know, based on census data, that there are 40,000 residents that live in Culver City. But anybody that travels through Culver City during the daytime knows that there's a lot more than 40,000 people inside Culver City. I've tried, when I've come over to visit, going from one side of town to the other. I would love it if there were only 40,000 people in the city at the time. Police departments probably wouldn't love it because there'd be less revenues coming in. But I would love it because there'd be less traffic. So what we did was we had to try to understand and estimate, how do we understand who's coming through the city? So we looked at 4 different population sources. One, our residential population source, coming from our Census Bureau. Second was our commuter source, coming through our red light violators. And third, our bordering cities and communities, as we looked at who surrounds us. And also, we're going to show you a demographic view of the CCPD staff. So let's look at our residential versus our commuting red light violation populations. So here you can see in our green is the demographic makeup of the residential community represented by the census. And then in our yellow is our estimated demographic breakdown of our community based on our red light violations. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrew, Captain Belante, to really explain that for a moment.
Thank you, Paul. So in last year's RIPA report, to get a better estimate of our Culver City community, the demographics, we took a sample of red light data. In Culver City, we have 20 red light cameras that are equally distributed through the city. Last year, we took a approximate 3,000 red light ticket sample. That consisted of a photograph of the vehicle that was captured on a red light camera, as well as the driver. This year, we took a larger sample size of 4 months worth of red light data, over 12,000 red light cameras. And in reviewing that data, these are the demographics that we had here depicted in the yellow. As you can see, for Asian subjects, 9%, black subjects, 28%, Hispanic subjects, 27%, white subjects, 26%, and other 10%.
Thank you. So again, what we're trying to do is find an analog for the expanded population size that we experience, but we're trying to measure it scientifically to try to find a way to see what it looks like. Our next population comparison is between our residential and our bordering communities. So we have 5 bordering communities, and when we look at their composition and compare them to the residential composition, the demographic composition of Culver City, this is what the numbers look like. In our green, again, we have our Culver City residential population. And then in the orange, we have our bordering communities population. And for information purposes, we thought it was helpful to provide this graphic of looking at our residential demographic versus our Culver City Police Department staff demographic. So in this population, in this graphic, once again, our residential is represented in the green, and our Culver City Police Department staff is represented in the blue. So next, we're going to look at a highlight of these things. We're going to look at the 2023 data by race. We're going to compare that to the 2022 data. Then we're going to look at the data by gender and then by age. So this is our 2023 RIPA data by race. And this is our comparison of 2023 RIPA data, which is in the blue, and our 2022 RIPA data, which is in the orange. This is the overall data by race. This is our 2023 RIPA data by gender. And lastly, this is our 2023 RIPA data by age. And again, for purposes of not having to say a word multiple times, remember this is perceived. Perceived race, perceived gender, and perceived age. So now we'd like to look at that RIPA data that we just saw, and we want to put it into the context of the communities and the populations that I just mentioned. So first we'll look at our 2023 by population sources. So once again, keeping things consistent, our residential community demographic is represented by the green. Our commuting red light violations is represented by the yellow. Our bordering communities is represented by the orange. And our RIPA data, the percentage of people detained, is represented by the blue. And the next slide, this slide shows that same comparison for last year. So if we toggled back and forth between the two, there'd be very little differences between 2022 and 2023. Next, we want to talk about the sources of detention. So when law enforcement detains people, there are two sources. There are community-generated calls for service, and there's police-initiated activities. So we're going to look at the differences between those in our RIPA data. So there were 8,345 total detentions in 2023. Of those, 19% were community-generated calls for service. Sure. I'll let the expert explain that.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. So a detention is essentially a police contact wherein the individual being contacted is not free to leave. So the best and most common example that we can give for police detention is a traffic stop. Police officer sees a violation of a vehicle code section, somebody runs a red light, and they conduct a traffic stop on that person. That person is being detained until they're given a ticket and sent on their way. You can also be detained in arrest situations when somebody calls the police and there's a crime that is occurring and so forth. But again, the best way to describe it is when police contacts you and you are not free to leave. That's a detention.
Excellent question. Thank you. As I was saying, there were 8,345 detentions in 2023. 19% of those were generated by community calls for service, and the other 81% were generated by police-initiated activity. So as you look at that data by race, this shows the total of all the RIPA detentions compared to those that were community generated. Yes. That's outside of, I do numbers versus predictions, particularly in this state.
And just in terms of our practice and what we would do in those situations, again, it's the police officer's best guess that's making the detention. Sometimes they have a driver's license in their hand, which could help. But if they can't figure it out, we have the option of the other category, and that's what they would use. But it is difficult. It is difficult.
Great question so far. Our next slide shows the RIPA detention comparisons to police-initiated activities by perceived race. So as we conclude the highlights, so you have the full report in front of you. Those were the things we thought we wanted to highlight. Let me give you my thoughts as a data scientist, as an organizational psychologist, and about your police department. Number one, I work with more than 52 police departments in the state of California. And the Culver City Police Department is the only one that is doing this level of analysis with its data. Most police departments, what they do is they collect the data and they report what they collect. Culver City, in continuing its history of transparency, is collecting the data and dedicating a lot of man hours, woman hours, I'm going to say comfort dog hours, because they have to support the officers that are doing this report, to looking at this data and making analysis about this data and creating takeaways. And in a few moments, I'm going to turn it back over to the chief, and he's going to talk about some of the takeaways from this report. But this is one of the only agencies that I'm aware of that puts this much effort into analyzing this data. So you should be very, very proud of that and very happy that that's happening in your community. Second thing, yes, give them a hand. Captain Belante is a fellow data nerd. The second thing is importance of collecting good data. So we've had this presentation with our Chiefs Advisory Panel members, and we've got some really good suggestions from them about other data sources that we can use so that we can improve the quality of the data and understand the context of the data and look at things that may be anomalous in the data and ask questions about how do we do things differently and what can we do differently. So I'm going to, on that note, turn it over to the chief.
Thank you, Dr. Connor. And so in terms of takeaways, so this is our second year doing this. And we learned a lot last year, the first time that we did this. We learned that we probably need help, so we got that. And we learned that the more good data that we can get, the more informative that this process and this report will be for us. And so we worked to collect more, as Captain Belante mentioned earlier, when we expanded the amount of red light tickets that we looked at, and better data over the last year. So not only did we expand the red light data, and which obviously gave us a much bigger sample size, which hopefully results in better data, we implemented a software that our officers are now using starting January. When we first started the RIPA process in 2020, we were an early adopter of RIPA. In fact, one of the first agencies in the state of California our size to start collecting and reporting RIPA data, and we have been leaders in this space since 2020. We started using paper forms, old school, because the processes related to collecting and reporting RIPA data hadn't been invented yet. So the tech industry quickly was catching up. Software became available to both collect and report RIPA data, and we implemented that software again in January. So that's going to help us for next year, because now we're utilizing that data, which is helping us to be more accurate, which is helping us to collect more data. One of the things we added to the software is zip codes for the individuals that we're detaining, because we want to have an understanding, again, of our community, what our community looks like, who we're detaining, where they're from, who's coming to our city. All of these things are important. This is a very nuanced topic when we're talking about RIPA data, who we are detaining. There's a lot that goes into that, as we talked about. Calls for service, police initiated. There's all kinds of different things that fall into those two categories. What does that look like? A lot of different reasons why our citation numbers may look one way versus another way, and we can dive into those if need be. But the main takeaway that we came away with, again, last year and this year as well, is we need to collect more and better data. So we're doing that. And one of the things that we implemented actually late last year were automated license plate readers that are positioned all throughout the city. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays into next year's report, how we can use that data. One of the things we know now is it's helping us to understand just how many cars are coming through Culver City on any given day or month. We know that these license plate readers, which are positioned at 26 intersections throughout the city, are reading 17 million license plates a month. Now, the same license plate is getting read multiple times, but when you take a look at the unique license plate reads, which means when a license plate is read within a month one time, then it doesn't get counted for the rest of that month. It was 1.6 million reads. That's a lot of people and cars moving through this city. So how is that going to play into our data next year? How's that going to play into our report? We don't know. But we're going to have that data available to us. And we're going to continue to look for other data sources and other ways that we can interpret and analyze this data, again, to make a better report, which, as was previously mentioned, helps us to inform our decision-making process as an organization in a variety of different ways. And so those are some of our takeaways that we learned this year.
I don't need a mic.
No, we need
More folks can hear you.
Oh, well, thank you so much. A couple of questions related. First of all, what have you learned from the data so far? And what do you plan to learn from the data as you develop more?
Thank you for the question. So I think I talked a little bit about our takeaways. Those are a lot of the things that we've learned so far over the 2 years of completing this process. But one of the, I don't know if it was surprising, but something that I found interesting and kind of confirmed what we already thought was just how diverse our community of Culver City is. And, we know, I think, that at least if I think we all know that Culver City is much more than just the 40,000 residents. It's the people coming, visiting, staying in, coming to school here in Culver City. It's much, much more. It's our surrounding communities who come to play, dine, visit Culver City. And this is an incredibly diverse area in our country. If not the world, one of the most diverse, LA County. And we're not an island with a fence around us. We're part of that. And so the Culver City community, and when we look at the different benchmarks that we've talked about, most specifically is the red light data, because you can't argue the red light data. It's taking pictures of people as they run red lights, and all throughout our city. And how closely that aligned to both our surrounding communities and the people that we're detaining. I found that to be very interesting. because it's very close in terms of how all those numbers align. And so that was something that we suspected that would be the case, but at least for me, I didn't expect it to be that lined up in terms of how those numbers all really are close. So those are some of the things that we learned. Great, and then we'll go to Tracy in the front here.
Jay-Z, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Oh, hi. Yes, thank you. So I have a question about, I'm actually looking at the report, but you shared the graph, figure 16, looking at the detention rates compared to the different population sources. And I guess I just don't understand why the bordering cities percentage and the red light commuting percentage is supposed to add context to the detention rates. I guess my question is, are you stopping people from West Adams and Baldwin Hills and Mar Vista? Like, I just don't understand why that's supposed to add context. Like, if anything, most RIPA reports show, right, the residential population percentage, right? So, for example, in Culver City, 9% of residents are Black, and then the stop rates, right, which are 31%. Because those stop rates, I'm assuming, contain more than just traffic stops, right? Even though that's the majority. So I guess I'm just confused about, the bordering cities percentage and the commuting red light percentage and why that's supposed to be stacked next to the detention rates. And then my additional question, I was just curious if there's any plans to do any time spent analysis, because I know the RIPA data also has requirements for officers to input start and stop times of stops. So just curious if maybe in future iterations, there's plans to do stop analysis, looking at how much time is being spent on different types of stops. So that's kind of my questions and comment.
Thank you so much for your questions. I think that I'll start with the time stop. I think that's a great suggestion and something that we can look at possibly for next year's report. Certainly that is an important aspect of our detentions, how long they take. They have to be reasonable for the situation. That's just a really high-level description of the law related to that. And so absolutely, we'll take a look at that, and if it makes sense, maybe that's something that we include in next year's report. And then in terms of why we have those different measuring points, if you will, in our report surrounding communities, red light data, is to add context to our RIPA numbers. Again, we police the community of Culver City. The community of Culver City is a lot more than just the residential population of Culver City. So as we're going about doing our day-to-day duties as a police department, let's say, for example, traffic safety is one of our primary duties as a police department. A big part of traffic safety is making traffic stops and issuing citations for traffic violations. And so as we're doing that, just again on a daily basis, and as you saw, that's the biggest part of our detentions are police initiated, and the biggest part of the police initiated stops are traffic stops. Those are happening all the time, all throughout the day. Again, millions of cars coming through Culver City. We're encountering people from all around Culver City, from all around the west side. The community of Culver City, again, is much more than just the residential population. Can't say that enough, right? We have 40,000 people who live here in Culver City. Culver City is not a bedroom community. Culver City is the opposite of a bedroom community. And it's important to understand that because the state report does nothing other than compare your RIPA data to your census data. Okay, they talk about how there are a lot of other factors. Every city has its own dynamics, population flow, traffic flow, other factors that you should consider, and that's what we're doing. I'll use a city that I talk about often when we're discussing RIPA, city of San Bruno. Anyone familiar with this city? City up north, Bay Area, South Bay Area. It's about the same size, same population as Culver City. 5 square miles, 40,000 residents. But the dynamics of San Bruno couldn't be more different than Culver City. San Bruno is a bedroom community. It's a residential community. The people that live there sleep there, drive to work. Outside of San Bruno, come back home at night. So that's a bedroom community dynamic. Culver City is very different. Our population swells to over 300,000 during the day. So whereas in a city like San Bruno, their population is going down, possibly during the day, from 40,000 to whatever it goes down to. Culver City is expanding greatly because of the influx of people from all around the west side and beyond. Many of the folks who work in Culver City live pretty far away from Culver City. I can tell you that because I know where my staff lives. And we're talking Santa Clarita, Orange County, Ventura County, all coming to Culver City. And that is not a unique dynamic. And so that's why we have those measuring points in the report.
Thank you. I just had a question. When we're talking about the stops, so if it's you've discerned that it's not really an incident, do you still collect the data? And how soon do you collect that data? Is it at the time of the stop, or does the officer do it when they go back?
Great questions. Thank you so much. So if we detain someone even for a couple of minutes, remember when I talked about what a detention is. The person's not free to leave. We have to complete the RIPA data, and we have to report that data. And so the data is collected, hopefully now that we have the software that I described earlier, pretty immediately, either during or after the stop. If not, then by the end of the officer's shift, they would complete that data. So they're doing it these days in a cell phone. It's just kind of like a select, check the box. Yeah, a little app, exactly what it is. Yeah, thank you.
Paul, you've been unmuted. Go ahead. Paul, you're unmuted. Go ahead. Okay, we'll go to the next caller.
Vicky, do you want to do it?
No.
Kimberly Ferguson, you've been unmuted.
Hello, thank you for doing this. This is really interesting stuff. A couple of questions. I didn't see, and maybe I missed it. Did you do any data on the ages of those that were detained? Age ranges, I should say. And then if there's some speculation of someone on the side, these are only red light statistics, correct? So there's not like a stop on the side of the road where you see someone that could be, doing something you're not sure if it's, correct or not to do. I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, thank you for the question. We do have data on the age range of the folks that are being detained. I can get you a page number here momentarily.
Page 31
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I sort of
and
scrolled
32.
quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just want to, I should have mentioned this earlier. My apologies. For those of you who are listening at home, if you go to our website, culvercitypd.org, and you click on Transparency Reports, and then go down to the RIPA report, click on that. You'll find the RIPA report, and you can follow along with us. Also,
Yes.
not only for the folks who are at home, but for everyone, if you're interested in, after this meeting, learning more, maybe you didn't understand certain aspects, which is absolutely understandable because we're still trying to understand all this stuff. We created a video series that explains a lot of the data. It's on our website. It's been on our social media. Please look at those. And if you ever have any questions, you can always just reach out to us via email or give us a call, and we're happy to meet with you, to have a phone conversation with you to discuss this stuff. And then in terms of your second question, are we keeping data on folks that we think are suspicious? I think is kind of what you were talking about.
Yes,
Getting
side of
at.
the road,
Yes. So absolutely. So if you look at page 30 of the report, it actually has the blue bar, which is described in the key at the bottom as RIPA, R-I-P-A. That bar delineates the folks that we have detained. And so that would be folks that we detained in a traffic stop, folks that we get a radio call for, and we respond to that call, and we detain somebody maybe in an arrest situation, maybe they were shoplifting at the mall or otherwise breaking into a car. It could be a variety of different things. So it's going to be both those suspicion stops, traffic stops, radio calls, and all of the above. That's our RIPA data. That's what that means. And so then we also listed in here, just kind of as for comparison purposes, again, to add context to the numbers that we're reporting to the state per the RIPA law. We included our red light data to get a sense of who's driving through Culver City on a daily basis, who those folks are, and then also our surrounding communities, because those folks are part of our Culver City community, and to have a better understanding of what the demographics of our Culver City community looks like, we have to look at our surrounding communities, because they're here in our community, at our schools, at our restaurants, the mall, and so forth, driving through the city, and so forth. And so those folks are part of our community, and that's why they are listed there. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Chief. Two quick questions. One, regarding the context that you were mentioning of our neighboring communities and red light data. The way I understand it is that context is important because we are also detaining people from those areas, from our neighboring areas. That's the context. So when we're talking about percentages, they're included in the percentage of detentions. And then follow-up, it wasn't clear to me on the red light camera data, is the race identified as perceived, or is it from the driver's license information?
Thank you for the question, Vice Mayor. To answer your second question, it's perceived race. So just like our officers would do, they're contacting folks in the field, best judgment. So we use kind of the same standard. And then in terms of, again, adding context to the report, absolutely. The reason why it's important to understand what our surrounding communities look like, what our red light data looks like. Again, we're trying to get an understanding of who is going through, who is coming to Culver City on any given day. And do those numbers reflect, are they similar or not to what our RIPA numbers are, who we're detaining, who we're arresting on a regular basis? That's important for us to understand. Because the whole purpose of RIPA is to identify potential issues related to disparate treatment, between different races, some sort of bias within our organization, with a member of our organization, or so forth. And so that's why we look at those numbers. That's why RIPA is so important. That's the purpose of RIPA. But when we're looking at who we're detaining, it's incredibly important to understand, who is in our community. And every city is different, but when you understand the dynamics of Culver City, Culver City, and the fact that the population and the size and the amount of people in Culver City fluctuates greatly depending upon the time of day, the day of the week as well. We really have to dive into those dynamics to have a better understanding of our community so that we can then take a look at, okay, well, are we policing this community? Are we serving this community the right way, in the way that meets our community's expectations? And that's our purpose as an organization. And so that's why we spend so much time, so much energy. We hire consultants to help us get a better understanding of all of those dynamics, because all of those dynamics, which can be very nuanced, are really important to understanding Are we policing our community in a fair and just way? And so that's why we spend so much time on it. Absolutely. And you know, again, can't state it enough. The community of Culver City is much more than just the 40,000 residents that live here. Please, Captain Blante.
Yes, sir. Great question. Just one thing I'd like to highlight with the acquisition of the Veritone software, which we implemented January 1st of this year. It gives us the ability to input the zip code of the individual we have detained and whether they are a Culver City resident or not. And just looking at a snapshot from this year, the first 3 months, approximately 93% of our detentions this year in 2024 are non-Culver City residents. And the vast majority of our detentions are related from traffic enforcement. So I want to make that noted. And then a statistic we've been keeping for years is the demographics of the individuals we arrest. And last year, 92% of the individuals we arrested were non-Culver City residents. A lot of those, 70% of those arrests come from radio calls for service that we're responding to when business owners or community members are calling us. So I think those are some important data points to bring up.
Thank you. A quick question. You guys were mentioning, obviously, daytime, nighttime population plays a huge part in how these numbers reflect. But you were talking, Captain, about traffic enforcement. Can you please describe some of the criteria or the traffic stops that we are making and things that we normally aren't making? I think it's really important to talk. I mean, it sort of relates in a bigger picture on this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Council Member. I think, and great question. So we are one of 4 police agencies in the state of California that has implemented a traffic stop policy that dissuades our officers from making traffic stops for equipment violations. Equipment violations are things like no front license plate, tinted windows, things of that nature. We want our officers to focus on hazardous moving violations when they're making traffic stops that have a positive impact on traffic safety in Culver City. There's a tremendous amount of cars moving through Culver City on every given day. I don't have to tell you that. It's our job to make sure that we do everything we can to keep this traffic flow moving in a safe way. And so a big part of that is traffic enforcement efforts. And so, again, back in 2021, we as a police department implemented, and at that time, I believe we were definitely one of the first in this region, if not the state, to implement what was at that time called an internal directive, directing our officers away from those low-level equipment violations that I mentioned earlier, toward, when we make traffic stops, when we do traffic enforcement, looking to make stops for hazardous moving violations that impact traffic safety. Running red lights, running stop signs, violations that impact pedestrian and bicycle safety, folks on their cell phones, the things that cause accidents in Culver City. So that's what we pay attention to. When an accident happens in Culver City, what is the primary collision factor? Okay, so that's a police term for what caused the accident. Okay, and so, we track that. Red lights, you're on your cell phone, distracted driving. And those are 2 of the big ones. Okay, so we look for that. Unsafe driving is another one, speeding. And so those are the violations that we look to make stops for to, again, have that positive impact on traffic safety here in Culver City. And so I think it's important to note some of those, again, just to restate some of the things that I said, because this is really important. Again, one of 4 police agencies in the state of California that has a traffic stop policy that directs our office, specifically says, we don't want you making these stops for these low-level equipment violations. We want you spending your time here. Okay, and so those are some of the nuances and things related to the traffic stops, and I think Captain Blante has something to add.
Yeah, just to reinforce what the chief stated, since 2019, we've seen an approximate 60% reduction in traffic stops, and that's primarily due to our new traffic stop policy with a specific emphasis on enforcing hazardous moving violations. And just to give you guys the top 5 reasons for stops related to traffic violations last year, they are as follows. Number 1 was unsafe turn or failure to signal. Number 2, failure to obey a posted sign. Number 3, failure to stop at a stop sign. Number 4, I know you guys are going to find this crazy, but using your cell phone while driving. And lastly, the number 5 was failure to obey the posted speed limit. So those are the top 5 reasons why we detain people related to traffic enforcement.
Going above. Guys are bound to give me a mic. The only department that's going above and beyond, so I appreciate it. I'm sure our community appreciates it. But thank you for all the hard work. Those videos that were were on point. For anybody that was confused on it, they were really did a good job of describing things and sort of setting things straight. So I really appreciate all your hard work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Vera. It's a lot of time, effort, energy spent doing this, and I want to thank Dr. Paul Connor for leading us through this process this year, and Captain Belante for all the hard work that he has done, and a lot of other people. Jennifer creating the videos with the help of some other folks, but I think it's important for, as a chief, I think it's important for me to say, at least I feel like it is, that this is incredibly important to us as a policing organization because we know it's important to our community. We work really hard. We're a community-oriented police department, and we are committed to that, and we work really hard to meet the expectations of this community. And we do that by engaging with our community so that we can understand what those expectations are, and then by taking them serious for having dialogue and discussions like this, and then by meeting with our Chiefs Advisory Panel. Many of the members are here tonight who help us to stay on track and educate us in so many different ways, and then by implementing policies, procedures, expectations, technologies that help us to meet those expectations. And so I just wanted to add to what Councilmember Vera was saying, and thank you, Councilmember, for the kind words. But you have our commitment that we will continue to strive to meet the expectations of this incredible community that we are all so honored to serve as we all work together to continue to make Culver City a safe and welcoming city for all. I think Jamie had a question. Absolutely.
Paul, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Oh, I don't think that it's Paul, but thank you. I had a question about the stop result FI card. Do you mind describing, I know that stands for field interview card. Just wonder if you could describe what that is and kind of what the purpose of that stop result is and when, what types of stops lead to that stop result, because it is one of the most common stop results.
Great question. Thank you. So an FI card is known as a field interview card. And we fill those out for a variety of reasons. Oftentimes we'll get a call for service. And we fill out a field interview card, which consists of the individual we have detained's name, date of birth, the reason why they're stopped, if they're in a vehicle or not. And then on the back, we write a brief synopsis of what the disposition of that call is. Also, sometimes when we're out there doing traffic enforcement, we oftentimes come across individuals that are on probation or parole, or suspicious subjects or nature, or someone that we end up arresting. We typically fill out field interview cards on those individuals. Field interview cards are very helpful for our detectives. Sometimes officers will detain an individual. They don't have any probable cause to arrest them, but they're suspicious in nature. So they fill out that field interview card. And then the next day we find out maybe someone's business got broken into, and we get video surveillance, and the individual depicted in that video surveillance is wearing the same clothing that is filled out on that field interview card 24 hours prior. And that helps our investigators solve crime. So that is the purpose of field interview cards.
And just to be clear, the caller's referring to the graphic on page 47 in the report. And the field interview card is only one of three categories in that top category. It's also warning, no action, and field interview card. So perhaps one of the things we can do next year is break that out so we have a better understanding of what's the discrete elements in that category. But it's not just field interview cards in that category. It's also warnings and no action.
That's a great takeaway, Paul. I think that we need to for sure remember for next year, because I know just based on looking at the different numbers as they come in, that our field interview cards are going to be the lowest percentage of that total number there between warnings, no action, and FI cards. So thank you for that. That's a great question.
I have 3 different hands that have gone up out here in the audience, so I'm coming around 4 now. So I'm coming around as fast as I can in order.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and all the analysis. I really appreciate having this type of data. I'm looking at figure 33, individuals with contraband during a search by perceived race. And I'd be interested to understand, because it seems like you have all the data, the slice of that compared to the outcomes of those detentions. And I don't know if you have that information readily available. Also, figure 44. It says 2023 types of forces used in responses to resistance categories. And once again, I assume you have the data of the perceived race of those that did interface with police officers and experience anything from physical restraint up to officer-involved shooting. I'm on page 58, sorry. Figure 44, page 58. I should have mentioned the page number. Page 58, so that question, and then the previous one was on page 45, figure 33. I'd be interested in understanding the outcomes of those, and I will also ask about figure 7, page 10, and can you help us understand kind of the disparity between Hispanic in particular, which is kind of the largest disparity? Residential is 18%, commuting red light violations, which I would be curious to know if that's a state accepted like comparison. And I understand what you're trying to do, right? To find a proxy for understanding the racial makeup of the daytime occupancy. Considering the red light cameras, and I know that it's been suggested that you do a certain time of day, 4 months, but if you're taking at night versus daytime and versus, are they local? Are they outside of the city? There's just a lot of variance there that I think I'm not sure how good of a proxy for the community it is. I think bordering cities, which is so close, is probably better. So finally, comparing the disparity for the Hispanic, right? RIPA is 37%. Whether you look at bordering cities or residential, significantly lower. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to remember with everything you asked, so we'll see how this goes. But I think I'll start on page 58. And you were talking about the use of force data that we have depicted in the graph. So first off, it's important to understand that we have been and we continue to very closely track our use of force data. And we've been doing that for many years. We report that in our quarterly report, and I think we're able to pull that up. And that breaks down the, I think you were looking to add racial demographics to that. Is that what you were asking? Yeah. It's also on page 60, according to Dr. Connor. So if we look at page 60, which we should all have, then we see the racial kind of breakdown of, the folks that we encounter and encounter some level of resistance. And it's important to know that we use force. When we encounter a level of resistance and we have to overcome that resistance. The vast majority of the force that we use is a very low level. And it's described in the report on what page, Andrew? We'll get you that page number. Page 57, the different levels of force. So out of the 146 incidents of out of the 149 incidents of force that we encountered last year in 2023, 146 of them are limited in nature. And it's also important to understand that these categories are derived straight from the RIPA report. And so limited in nature means, anything from restraining and detaining somebody. So just forcibly putting their hands behind somebody's back during an arrest situation to handcuff them, up into like taking somebody to the ground, and then handcuffing them. It's also important to note that almost all of our use of force incidents occur during an arrest situation. And so those are going to be, as a result, 70% of the time due to a call for service that we receive from the community. And so as I stated earlier, there's a lot of nuance that goes into this. And so those are some of the dynamics that play into it. The numbers are here. Those numbers, again, we report on a quarterly basis. They can be found on our website, culvercitypd.org. This report that we're looking at here is our fourth quarter report from 2023, so essentially our year-end report. But we have reports going back for years there. Let's see. I know you had a question about page 10. So we'll go there.
And I can answer that because
Please.
That's one of the things I raised on page 28. You can see that the comment I made was this contextual data offers the CCPD an opportunity to understand and explore the reason why its officers are detaining larger numbers of individuals perceived to be Hispanic or Black. So that is something I call out on page 28 in the report.
And just to add to what Dr. Connor has stated, it's important to understand that the whole purpose of adding the data related to our surrounding communities or the data related to our red light camera violations is to not to offer concrete answers. That's not what this is about. This is we put that we include that data to offer a level of context. And it helps us to understand the numbers as well. And so we hope that it also informs the community. And that this is, again, as I've stated several times, Culver City is much more than just the residential population. That's the whole point. That's what this data helps us to understand. The red light data in particular, the red light cameras are positioned all throughout Culver City. They're taking pictures of people running red lights all hours of the day and night. We looked at 12,000, over 12,000 citations that were collected, and we collected that data by analyzing 4 months, 1 month each quarter, taking the data, all the data, daytime and nighttime data from each month. And so it's, we believe, a pretty fair representation of who's driving through our city throughout any given day. And what was your next question?
And we're also open to suggestions on other analogs and proxies that we could use to help determine the demographic makeup of the people that form the whole community.
I'm sorry, you had a question about another graph? Oh, we'll bring it back over.
So I had the question on figure 7, which is the one I think you've commented on, that you are highlighting, that is something to look into and explore further. And did I understand correctly that basically between figure 44 and figure 46, sorry, page 58 and 60, that this means that 38% of resistance categories would be perceived as black, and 29% of resistance. Am I doing that math right?
Yes, sounds right, yeah.
Okay, so that's basically aligns with the percentage of people experiencing these encounters with police as highlighted in figure 48.4, correct? I just did the math, okay. Great. I think I would recommend that we do a little bit more of that layering, right? So that if we're going to be showing this data, then, maybe putting it like, this is how the breakout is. And I don't know, I think I saw somewhere in here, is there a category for people that might be experiencing homelessness in here? Did I see it or no? Not this year? Is that something planned? Because I think that would be a good thing, and to understand both the outcomes by percentage and by race.
Definitely, and that was something that was recently enacted this year as far as a RIPA requirement. So in 2024, it will be captured.
Yeah, we started capturing that data, and thank you. This is all great stuff, and this is why we have these meetings. We started capturing that data in January this year when we implemented that software. It's obviously very difficult sometimes to understand the homelessness and different levels of it and all those things, all those dynamics, but just like all of the other kind of categories are also very difficult, we're going to do our best. And we do have that included in our Veritone software that I described earlier for this year. So it'll be in next year's report.
Hello, thank you. I just want to first start off by saying thank you. A lot of us in here are CAP advisory panel members, and I think it's important when you use that as a reference that people fully understand what we are doing. And in that, this group of people is very diverse. We come from different walks of life, we are different nationalities, we are different age groups, and we all come from, some are business owners, some have been in the community for many, many years, some are new to the community, and I think it's important to understand that when we're having these meetings about this information and about this data, how many different views are coming into play. So that's first. So I'd like to say thank you as a member, and this is completely voluntary. We're not hand-selected, we're not hand-picked, we're not paid. This is what we want to do to make the community better. With that, I would like to say that going over the information from what we discussed previously in the CAP meetings and what I see in the data is a phenomenal change. We did recommend the transient followings to see how many transients and how many, as a business owner here, my business has been vandalized by transients. However, I am a very big proponent and person of the mobile crisis unit and trying to help with rehousing because it's just part of the environment now since COVID. So I'm very much so looking forward to that being in this report moving forward. Again, I want to raise the question of the zip codes being a predominant emphasis on this report, because when people's registration and the addresses that are listed on their driver's license may not be exactly where they reside. And I feel like it's pointing a finger at that group of people in that particular zip code, and it may not have anything to do with them. So when we're doing these types of reports and when we're doing these, we want to be mindful of that, because you don't want anyone to feel specifically targeted. Okay, that's first. Second, looking through the report again another time, I'm curious to know, yes, we know the nationalities of everyone who has been detained or whether they were part of the community or not, but I want to get a full synopsis on the people who are placing the calls, like from the community. What nationality are they? What age group are they? What dynamic of life walks are they? Because I feel like that is just as important as who's being detained and why they're being detained, because everybody's purviews are not the same. So moving forward, is that something that we are willing to look into or to add to this report?
Thank you for your comments and questions. And in terms of the zip codes, totally understand what you're saying, and you know, it's none of this is an exact science. Let's just start there. It's far from that. The idea behind collecting zip codes is, again, just to add another data point to add context to the report and to these types of conversations. It's something new for this year. We haven't done it yet. We just started to collect it this year, so we'll see what it looks like. You know, if at the end of this year it's not valuable to us, then maybe we don't do it the next year. And then in terms of collecting the type of demographic data on the folks who are calling for service, it's difficult to do for everybody. And I think, folks would have concerns about privacy and things like that. And we don't ever want to dissuade somebody from calling 911 when they need help. But I get what you're saying, and we're looking to implement a new software this year, hopefully, that late in the year, so it may not be helpful for our next year's report, but maybe moving forward, that helps us to have a better understanding of exactly what you're saying. Not only understanding who's calling, the reasons why, and all of that, but understanding kind of their feelings about the service they received from their police department and the outcomes, whether or not they're satisfied and things of that nature. So that's a software we're looking to implement. We'll see what that looks like when we get it implemented and whether or not that data makes it into next year's report. But who knows what the future holds. Maybe at some point in time we will be collecting the data that you suggested related to the folks who call 911. This is this is ever changing, the law related to this and our practices related to RIPA. So we'll see. Appreciate the comments.
Sorry. Got a couple questions. You mentioned the low-level equipment stopping people. Well, that sounded smart. Has there been any change in that policy?
So we implemented, thank you for your question, I appreciate it. We implemented what was called at the time in 2021 an internal directive. Essentially, it was a memo to the organization from the chief instructing our officers to focus on hazardous moving violations and not focus on the low-level equipment violations that I mentioned. That was in place until 2023, in late 2023, when we incorporated that spirit and that language into our traffic stop policy, which was already existing in our duty manual. We're one of only 4 police agencies in California to have this type of traffic stop policy. Can't stress that enough. We truly are an industry leader in this space. As was previously mentioned, since 2019, since implementing this policy and the trend continues, our traffic stops as a whole have gone down 60%. 60. And using our traffic sites as a measure related to this very topic, I can tell you that the overwhelming majority, more than 95% of our traffic sites for last year were for these hazardous moving violations, not these low-level equipment violations. So we believe that the whole purpose of this policy, from the moment it was created in 2021 and all the way through it being implemented into our policy manual till today, is to do just as I stated, to dissuade our officers from making those stops for low-level equipment violations and direct them toward making traffic stops for hazardous traffic violations that have a positive impact on traffic safety, and we are absolutely succeeding in that area. The policy is doing exactly what it's designed to do.
The second question has to do with the percentages of community-initiated and police-initiated stops. It seems like the community is low, but it said 46,000 calls.
Yeah, so we're only reporting the times that we detain someone. So oftentimes we have a call for service, again, 45,000 in a year where we don't detain someone. And so it might just be check the area for somebody speeding. And so our officers respond. They don't see anybody speeding. They clear the call. We weren't able to find anybody. Anytime our officers respond to a call and they don't detain somebody, that's a call for service, but we don't report that for RIPA purposes. Now, the reason why there's a big difference between police-initiated and community-generated is because the vast majority of the police-initiated contacts are traffic stops for the hazardous moving violations that I described earlier. Again, millions of cars moving through Culver City. We're doing our part as a police department to have a positive impact on traffic safety. That means our police officers are making a lot of traffic stops, and although a lot less than 2019, again, 60% down, but still that's the vast majority of our detentions. And those last about 10 minutes, whatever it takes to stop the car, walk up, get the driver's license, walk back, write the ticket, don't write the ticket, whatever the officer does. The community-generated calls take much longer. 70% of our arrests are a result of community-generated calls. And so those are the types of calls, use it as an example. Let's say, loss prevention at one of the stores at the mall arrests somebody for shoplifting. Our officer responds. They get out there, figure out what's going on, get the report from loss prevention. They end up, maybe this person doesn't have an ID or we're not able to identify them, or for some other reason we end up taking them to the station. Now we have to book them. That process takes hours. And so the community-generated calls, even just responding to a house to take a burglary report, okay? So we respond to a house to take a burglary report. That community-generated call, in this case I'm talking about maybe sometime where we detain somebody, we get a call of a burglary in progress, we respond, we get a person in custody for breaking into somebody's house, we have to take a report, we have to book this person. That's hours of time. versus the 10 minutes to write somebody a ticket. That's why the numbers are the way that they look. But if we measured it by time, and maybe that's something that we'll do next year if we're able to, time spent on those stops, that might be something valuable to look at in those detentions. Yeah.
I did a ride along, and wow, there's some terrible drivers out there. It's amazing. And the last question. My understanding is that sometimes indications that a car is not well kept, that it's missing a registration or a license plate, can be an indication that someone, it's not that they can't afford to do it, but they don't want to do it so that they're not trackable. So if you're not doing stops based on that, which I understand used to result in some arrests and some finding of contraband, do the officers run plates on a car that they're kind of wondering about?
Yeah, so since implementing the automated license plate readers, that is much less of an issue. Because the minute a car with a warrant or a car wanted in connection with a crime or a car that's stolen drives through those intersections, we're going to be alerted. And so it's not much of an issue since we've installed those. Thank you for the question.
My husband's trying to watch on YouTube, and there's no audio on YouTube.
No audio on YouTube.
No, he's using YouTube, but there are links to. Okay, I think he's just out and about, so it's not.
The link to the WebEx is on culvercitypd.org.
What's his license plate number?
Sorry about that.
Hi, good night to everybody. Thank you so much, Captain, and the City of Culver City for doing this. My name is Jeronimo Garcia, and I recently moved to Culver City about a year ago. And I used to live in LA, but looking at the page 28, and just kind of emphasize what one of our guests said today, that the percentage of Hispanics being detained, how do you guys interpret that, and what have you guys done in order to work with the community? I've been living in the Boundary City for many years, and back in the days, 15, 20 years ago, as part of the immigrant community, back then we didn't have a driver license. So what we will tell our communities, avoid the City of Culver City as much as you can, because it is possible that you're going to get either stopped by a minor traffic violation, so avoid that. That's what we used to tell our community. Now that we have a driver license, we can tell them, you can go and you can drive safely. But looking at the numbers, I would like to know what has been done with the department, or how the department has been engaged with the Hispanic community, but especially with the immigrant community, because some of them, you might know, we have the language barriers, and what have you guys done as a department in order to learn more about community, but at the same time, the community would like to learn more about our department and trust the department, because I think that's a very, very important issue. And I'm glad I came to the meeting. Sorry I was late. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I didn't catch your name. Geronimo. Thank you, Geronimo. And if you don't mind staying afterwards, we can have some conversations about how maybe we can connect, and we can connect more with your community, and hopefully you can help us to do that. We truly appreciate it. We have many, many Spanish speakers at our police department, if that's an issue. And so, we're a community-oriented police department, as I said earlier, so we truly value that. Thank you for your comments. So in terms of the numbers and, the percentages that we see here, as I stated before, I don't have concrete answers for everything. There's going to be variance in numbers year to year. The numbers were different last year compared to this year. I'm sure they'll be different for next year. I don't know exactly why the numbers are the way that they are. What I can tell you is that our numbers are lower than the state average in terms of the demographics and the percentage of Hispanic individuals being detained across the state. Whatever that's worth, I don't know how much it's worth. Every community is different, as I stated. But we're going to continue to track it, and we're going to continue to look at it and analyze it. Certainly, we are constantly looking at whether or not we're policing our community in a professional way that is, again, meets our community's expectations in a way that's free from bias. And we do that in a variety of different ways. One of the ways that we do that is by looking at, are we getting complaints for racial profiling or things of that nature? And I can tell you that we had very few last year. We had 3. And those were fully investigated, those complaints, as we are legally obligated to investigate every complaint that we receive. And they were not substantiated. And all of those complaints for racial profiling as of a year or two ago are sent to the state, California Department of Justice, for a secondary review of the incident. So it's not just our eyes that are looking at them, it's another set of eyes. But I hear what you're saying. When you look at these numbers, as a member of your community, you're concerned about that. So I love what you said about connecting with the community and learning more about the community. Let's do that. Let's talk afterwards. Absolutely.
I'm going to plug we have a Residents Academy too, that we invite people to join where we can connect with you more, and I'll share my information with you after because we have a fall class starting up.
First of all, I'd like to thank Chief Sims and Dr. Carner for, and everyone connected with the work as far as putting this data together. I just have, some of my, since I read the report, and I just had some takeaways that most of the crime appears to happen as a result of the increased daytime population in Culver City. And on page 28, the second full paragraph is very revealing to that. And also on page 31, according to page 31, most police interactions appears to involve the age group 18 to 40, which I combine those to be about 75%. And then the other age group, 41 all the way up to after 41, 55, 19% with 1% of the folks 51 and above. So essentially 75% of the interactions are between 18 and 40, and then about 20% for those folks 41 and above. According to page 34, those interactions having to deal with 74% of males. And on page 35, it indicates the same percentage that the interactions of the LGBT is only about 1%. And I think the data on page 36 basically confirms what's on page 31. On page 45, I was surprised to see the data that suggests on search of contraband. In other words, that the Asian population is 42%, 36% black, 40% Hispanic, 39% white, and 31% other. It just seems, the whole perception when you see, traffic stops on TV, it's either black or Hispanic, and then here it is, Asian. So it was just a thought. It has nothing to do with aspersions or anything else, but it's just interesting as far as the factual things. And page 56 of the 46,957 police contacts, there were only 149 incidents where police encountered resistance. Based on the contacts, This represents 0.3% of the folks that are involved in resistance. So it just seems to me that the data indicated in this report, the Culver City Police factual interactions, as they pursue their mission to provide public safety, it is a reflection of what actually happens. And since I anticipate some skeptics will question every aspect of the report, it would be interesting to compare, and other folks have indicated this in earlier conversations today, the Culver City data should be compared with probably what the LAPD and the LA Sheriff's Department might be doing. Knowing these demographics are I admit, apples and oranges, but it would reveal more of a graphic detail on how well the Culver City Police Department is compared with other regions. And lastly, I think the data indicated in the report dispels, for me anyway, any assertions that the police in general contribute to in any way to the school to prison pipeline. I think one must acknowledge that the school to prison pipeline starts at the home. So I applaud you for this effort. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know this is going to seem kind of irrelevant, but it stuck in my mind because you were talking about moving violations and traffic violations and what is being seen as being dangerous. And because I witness this quite frequently, and I don't mean just bikes going through stop signs. I mean bikes actually running red lights, which is extremely dangerous, not just for the cyclists, but also for the drivers. And I was wondering if any of these moving violations ever include any of the cyclists who are running these red lights. I was just curious about that. And by the way, this is a very well done report, and I've listened to a lot of really interesting questions, and I'm so glad I came tonight. So thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. In short, the answer is yes, we pay attention to those types of violations that you described. In fact, we're awarded, and we have been for several years, grant funding through the Office of Traffic Safety, the state. Most police departments are, and we utilize that grant funding to do focused patrol efforts to target areas within the city who are having traffic issues to, again, have a positive impact on traffic safety. And there's very specific categories in terms of the types of violations that we're looking for. And specifically, a lot of that is related to bike and pedestrian safety. And so that's both the cars and the bicyclists. And so we're looking at both. In fact, one of our primary collision factors, again, the reasons why traffic accidents occur, one of the main factors, and we track that, and those are the violations that we look for so we can have a positive impact on traffic safety in Culver City, are bicycles that are riding the wrong way. And that's very dangerous to do, especially on busy streets. And so we look for all of that and do our best to, again, impact traffic safety in Culver City in a positive way.
So they'll get anxious to get through the light, and then rather than waiting for the red light, they'll go through the red light in order to cross Culver, which is, maybe there aren't cars close, but those cars come really fast. And if you're from a stop on a bicycle and you're trying to get across 4 or 5 lanes of traffic, that's really scary. Every time I see that, it scares me, and I've seen it probably 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah.
So
thank you. Yeah, we'll keep a lookout. Those types of things are, and what I described earlier, riding the wrong direction as a bicyclist, are extremely dangerous for everybody on the road, but especially the bicyclists because they're on a bike. So thank you.
Chief, we have a couple of questions online. Jay-Z, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Yes, I was wondering if there were plans to publish the raw RIPA data. I know the city of Long Beach publishes their RIPA data, obviously Los Angeles County, which, Culver City's in. But yeah, just curious if the city of Culver City, if you guys are going to publish your raw data.
Thank you for the question. And actually, that data is published. It's on the California Department of Justice website. We appreciate the question, and maybe we will look to put a link to that data in the RIPA section of our website. So we appreciate that.
Kimberly, you've been unmuted. Go ahead.
Oh, great. Thank you. I'm really enjoying this. This is a great report. Thank you for all your efforts. So this question may be a little bit off to the side, but it comes under your contraband arrest or detentions. I've been curious how much marijuana versus under the influence of alcohol or other types of substances have been part of those arrests.
We don't have those numbers in front of us. My apologies. But I can tell you that the arrests for marijuana is very, very low. In fact, you get a ticket for if you're caught with marijuana these days. You're supposed to keep it at your home, but I don't know that we are issuing many of those these days. So very, very few for marijuana, if any. And certainly we encounter folks who are under the influence of alcohol, especially with our traffic stops. We made 166, I believe, arrests last year for driving under the influence of alcohol. Incredibly important issue for us as we work to keep the streets of Culver City safe. And so that's a focus of ours, especially related to traffic safety. Thank you.
That's all we have online.
Great. Well, let me give Paul an opportunity to make some closing remarks.
So again, I want to thank you all for participating in person as well as online. As we begin tonight's discussion, remember Sir Robert Peel. That's why they call the British police bobbies, from Sir Robert Peel, or peelers, in some of the more rough neighborhoods of the UK. The public is the police, and the police is the public. And so continue to demand from your police department that they listen to your voice, that they interact with you, and that they do their jobs to make your community safer. Thank you again for being here from my perspective.
Please give Dr. Paul Connor a hand. And thank you for all your hard work with the RIPA report and leading us through this process, Paul. Truly appreciate that. I want to just close by thanking my staff who are here tonight, members of the command staff, our support staff over here who are managing the ones and twos, if you will. And then most importantly, I want to thank all of you. Thank you for being a part of this process. This is a learning process for us. That's how we view this. And it started in 2020 when we were early adopters of RIPA, and it's continued to now, and it will continue. And I truly appreciate you being here tonight and being a part of this learning process for us. We truly value your input, your thoughts, this discussion. I want to encourage you to continue to be involved with your police department. This is our community. This is our police department. We have opportunities to do that. Our Citizens Police Academy that was mentioned before. At some point in time down the road, we will recruit for our Chiefs Advisory Panel again. Or you can just give us a call and we can have discussions. This is an incredible city where you can, if you call your city leaders, including your police chief, you will get a call back. So please don't ever hesitate. And thank you all for being here tonight.